I enjoy reviewing turntables, and it's probably because I have been fascinated, really fascinated by turntables since I was 5 or 6 when my parents bought me the close and play. Now, what was a close and play? Well, it was this. For me, a turntable is like an old friend, and friends do change over the years. Some you have a bond with, but when you reconnect, it's like no time has passed. And I know I'm sounding a little bit sentimental here, but it is because I reconnected with an old friend and it felt like no time has passed. And there were changes. This old friend changed, but I like the changes. Now, I'm not going to go into my whole relationship with vinyl. I've done that before in other videos. But there was a period of time when I stepped away from it. And when I returned to it a few years later, there were a couple of turntables that I owned, and one which really stood out to me, one that I really enjoyed using, and that was the U-Turn Custom Orbit made by U-Turn Audio out of Woburn, Massachusetts. Now, this is that turntable. And I loved it. And what I really liked about the Orbit was U-Turn Audio's attention to detail and ease of use. A turntable's job is, I don't want to say simple and simplify it too much, but a turntable's job is to reproduce sound from the groove of a record. And the U-Turn Orbit knew its job and did it well. Were there things I would have changed? Well, absolutely. I could say that about any turntable. And there were specifically a couple of things about the U-Turn Orbit that I would have changed from that original Gen 1 model. And there were others I think that agreed with me about those changes, which I'll get to. But one of the things I love about U-Turn Audio as a company is that they listen. They truly listen. I'm going to get to that in just a second, but I do want to tell you about today's sponsor. I do love companies that really put care into their product. These beautiful record storage consoles are just a perfect example of that. They're handmade in the US by Sidetracked Workshop, and they're made of quality, sturdy construction, wood construction, with a modern design that hints of mid-century. Some of these consoles can hold both your record collection and also your turntable. The Sidetracked Workshop ships for free in the US, and their consoles arrive fully assembled. All you have to do when it comes to your home is screw in the feet, find a spot to, showcase your joy of vinyl, and you're good to go. And Sidetracked Workshop also offered, and this is very kind of them, a 15% discount for viewers of this channel, meaning you. All you have to do is use the discount code that is in the description below and pop it in at checkout. Now, I said that there were two things that I would change about the Gen 1 Orbit. One was its speed control. The other was the way that the belt interacted with the platter. So let's start with the speed control. The original Orbit speed control required the user to manually move the belt. Now, I don't own any 7-inch 45s. Well, I do, but they're really bad shape that my dad owned back in the 50s. But I do own some 45 RPM 12-inch records. And having to manually change the speed on the U-Turn Orbit was admittedly a pain in the ass. And that's because of the second thing I spoke about, the belt's interaction with the platter. The belt had a habit of slipping off almost every time I did it. And I'm admittedly clumsy, so I'm sure a lot of that's on me. And I also felt that I was probably unnecessarily stretching the belt by doing so and constantly having it slip off the platter. So I ended up buying a bunch of belts just because I wanted to make sure I always had a spare. And I know I wasn't the only one. And why do I know this? Because like I said earlier, U-Turn listens to their customer. They have probably, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, they have probably the most customer-oriented mission and culture than any other company in any other industry. And I know that's a big statement, but I firmly believe that. A lot of companies could take a card out of U-Turn's, or a page, is probably a better analogy, a page out of U-Turn's book. And I experienced it firsthand. Now, we'll get to their customer service in just a little bit, but I do want to back up my statement about the fact that they listen to their customers, and they do. And this is a perfect example of it, their next generation of turntables. So let's take a look at the Orbit Special. I will point out that you will see during this review an Ortophon Blue on this turntable. The Orbit Special actually ships with an Ortophon Red, but I have a few cards here, so I just swapped it out because I prefer the blue over the red, and that's just a personal preference. but everything I'm about to say applies to any cart that you have on this turntable, be it the Ortofon Red, the Blue, the Bronze, or even the Black. Let's start with a couple things that shows that U-Turn cares about the joy of their customers. How about the platter? It has a frosted acrylic platter, and I do love acrylic platters. Now it has a groove cut into it to allow for easy belt integration, and it won't slip off if you have to move the belt to adjust for speed on the motor. Notice I said if you have to. All models from the basic to the plus to the special all have that new grooved platter. And with the special, you get something else. You get speed control. Customers spoke and U-Turn listened. Those were the two changes that I would have made if it were up to me with that first generation, and there they are. But U-Turn wasn't done. They made some other exciting upgrades to their new line. Let's start with the tonearm, and this applies to all of their models from the basic one on up. They've redesigned the tonearm, which they call the Orbit Arm 3, or OA3 for short. It's a one-piece magnesium arm. It's lightweight and it's meant to reduce vibrations. And it has a counterweight so you can adjust for VTF when changing cartridges. Now, anti-skate is fixed when it's built, and they hand make all of their turntables at their facility in Woburn, Mass. Now, I tested the anti-skate with the Wally skater that I had a review on just maybe a week ago, and it tested fine, tested perfectly. I mean, I do prefer to adjust anti-skate myself and have the ability to do so, but U-Turn knows their customer base, and they've made it incredibly easy. The drive system was also redesigned, and it sits off to the side so that any motor vibrations don't reach the platter. And the motor is exceptionally quiet. And the special also comes with the Q-arm. And for me, a Q-arm is essential. Now, I can be clumsy, which I've said a billion times, but I even like this Q-arm. And that says a lot because it's just a Q-arm. But it gently lowers the stylus to the groove, nice and slow, which negates my clumsiness. You do have the option with the special to have a built-in preamp, and it's no secret that I prefer external preamps, so a majority of my testing was done with the Project S2 tube phono stage. But I did test out the built-in preamp, and it sounded just fine. And U-Turn also sells their own external stage called the Pluto 2. I do have a story about that. The special sits snugly in the mid-range level of turntables and starts at $549 US dollars without the built-in phono stage. And for about $300 less, you can start with their entry-level Orbit Basic and still get that improved tonearm, the redesigned motor, and that grooved platter. They have all their bases covered for all budget levels. And did I mention the plinth? I don't think I did. Anyways, their plinth, too, is made of solid wood, and they come in some pretty cool colors, too. Now, I've enjoyed using the Orbit Special so much, it now has a permanent place, or permanent home, in the upstairs review room. Now, I want to get back to something I said earlier about their exceptional customer service. Now, being very, interested in turntables and having a lot of questions, I had to contact them a few times when I bought my first Orbit, my first original Orbit a few years ago. I had to contact them a few times, and they were always very quick in responding. And I also I think I mentioned, had purchased their Pluto 2. When I did, I noticed a slight buzzing coming through my speakers, so I contacted U-Turn. And they sent me, overnight, no questions asked, specialized grounded cables to solve the problem. And it did. It worked great. The buzzing was gone. And that was no anomaly. I've read account after account on both Reddit and other places about their great customer service and how they really care about their customers and their customers' experience. If it sounds like I'm a fan of the company, I really am. I'm a paying customer. I've used their products for years, and U-Turn will always have a place in my home and a place in my heart. Now, I mentioned anti-skate in this review and how I tested it. If you're curious about that, just check out this video over here. It'll explain the tool I used. And as always, thank you so much for being here. And until next time, take care of yourself and enjoy your records.